And by the way, it's so obvious to us that we miss it. Has anybody here ever lived in eternity?
Yeah.
By the way, if you have your hand up, you have. You're right. But that's the only way you would even know what eternity is. Think about a word that you've never experienced before. I'll give you a heads up. It's impossible. Because Socrates believes that you don't know what you don't know. And the things that you do know, by the way, are infinite because you have all knowledge. You've experienced the whole universe before. You just don't realize it because you've been conditioned to forget it by being brought down into a physical body that can't possibly live in eternity. Think about that. You live in a vessel that can't live in eternity, and yet you have a concept of eternity. That didn't make no sense. It made sense. So Socrates believes that how you answer that question has everything to do with your understanding of who and what your true nature is. Who and what you really are. Kill him. Kill him. Here's the fascinating thing about that, and about you, and about Richard Taylor. You cannot know the impact that you have. I wish I'd saved back then. I wish I'd done things differently. But what caused you to not do it? Because you didn't believe that there was a future. What's the worst case scenario of believing that there's a future? The worst case scenario is you live like there's one and you make one. What's the best case scenario of believing that there isn't one? There isn't a best case scenario. So the best case scenario of living like there's no future is still lower than the worst case scenario of living like there is one. Take the bet, man. You find that a lot, man. You're gonna find that most people live lives of quiet desperation. And why? A lot of times because it's easier. At least we think it's easier. We think that, what we've been conditioned to do, it's like, well, if this is what society expects of me, then I should go along with it. Because if I go against society, then it's like kicking against a wall. It's gonna be damn near impossible. And what happens if you're gonna try to change the world? Never talked about that with you? What happens if you try to change the world? Oh, geez, I'll give you some examples. Lincoln. Lincoln tries to change the world. He ends slavery in the United States. How does he die? He got shot. All right. All right. Who else? JFK. JFK tries to end the CIA. By doing so, he wants to bring in diplomatic connections between the United States and most of South America to help facilitate the growing of their economies. And what happens to JFK?
Breathing out of his forehead.
Yeah, he got JFK'd. He got shot. Mahatma Gandhi, love, peace, took when he wasn't busy sleeping naked in bed with 12-year-olds, his cousins, he was out preaching about peace and love with the rest of the world. True story, look it up. It's gonna get worse, don't worry. And so Gandhi, he's out there preaching peace and love. The guy owns nothing except like his glasses, I think a book, a pencil, and when he wore it. It's all he owned in the whole world. What happens to Gandhi? He got shot. Anwar Sadat signs the first peace agreement between Israel and the Arab world. Prime Minister of Egypt. They're so happy that they decided to have a parade for the guy. Say, come on now, wear something really bright and sit up in front. This is all a true story, by the way. Take a guess. What happens to Anwar Sadat? He got shot. Yeah. Oh. John Lennon took a break from his busy wife-beating schedule and wrote Imagine. From his multi-million-dollar apartment, he's singing about, imagine a world with no possessions. Imagine a world with no domestic violence laws. That guy never met a woman he didn't beat. But he wrote music, so if you can sing or dance, we'll forgive anything. Right, R. Kelly fans? Chris Brown fans? Michael Jackson fans? We'll forgive anything. What happens to John Lennon? He got shot. Yeah, it seems like if you try to change the world, you're going to end up getting shot. And Martin Luther King Jr., the man had a dream. Then he had a head wound. He got shot.
Keyword had a dream.
What's that?
Had
Had a dream. Yeah. He had a dream. And so, when you look at the people who try to change the world, why do they get shot? Well, because the world exists as it presently is. And it makes sense. And it works for us. Even if we don't like it, even if we're comfortable in it because we're conditioned by a world to live in a world. But once in a while, you get these figures who come along and they try to change things just a little bit. And they end up getting shot. Except for Jesus, he didn't get shot. Yeah, he got stabbed. He got nailed to a cross. Yeah, that's such an interesting study to me. And this is the part that I've never talked about before. This is a guy that whether you're religious or not, even if you're an atheist, most people pretty much agree Jesus is an all right guy. Had a good message, peace and love, except for that thing where he goes and clears out the temple and beats the crap out of everybody. But that's a side story with him. But for the most part, this is a pretty lovable guy. Everyone seems to like this guy. And yet, when he's born, if you know the stories, he's born outside of Jerusalem. He's born in Bethlehem because there's no room for him inside of the city. And as he grows older, there's no room for him in his own family. His family actually kind of casts him out. And then this is a guy that he goes to the temple. And there's no room for him in the temple. They kick him out of the temple. And even when he dies, he's crucified, there's no room to bury him inside the city. This is a guy who gets buried outside of the city. This is a guy who lives his entire life on the outside of everything. A guy who talked about inclusion was always cast to the outside of everything. And it strikes me as such a weird thing. How is it that the world could not get along with the holiest man who ever lived? And yet somehow it gets along spectacularly well with you and me. People walk around and they say they're Christians, and yet somehow you get along fantastically well in the world. Why on earth do you expect to be accepted everywhere? The people who we hold up and we admire throughout history, they weren't accepted where they went. They got shot. So why is it that the rest of us can walk around and feel like we have a right to be accepted everywhere? And we actually sigh and I'm not accepted here. And we struggle to get that acceptance that we're socially conditioned to want. It's like we're socially conditioned to behave in ways, and yet there's a rebel part of us that looks at people like MLK, and we're like, yeah, that's how it should be. And then there's always a society that pulls you back and says, yeah, but that's not how it is, and that's not going to work. And if you try to change it, you're going to get shot. And that's what it really is. We understand that, and yet it's interesting then. So then why do we hold these people up and pretend like we admire them? Great, you put a picture of them on your wall, but then you go to work the next day and live in the exact same society that they were raging against. It's funny that most of the people I just named, interestingly enough, never picked up a weapon, except for John Lennon when beating his wife. But everybody else didn't pick up a weapon to convert the world to their ideology. They went out there and they walked around. Socrates shows up and he asks questions. He asks a question, how do you know what you know? And then people are like, you know what, kill him. Why? Because then other people came along and they're like, yeah, how do you know what you know? This is a dude who's walking around in a toga with a big flat nose. Everybody made fun of him and he was unemployed, didn't have a job. It's okay, he had a rich wife, so it worked out for him. But he wasn't shot, but he gets sentenced to drink hemlock. Why? Because he changed the world. And how did he change the world? By one word. By one sentence. How do you know what you know? That's it. Because he believed that how you answer that question answers every other question in the world. How do you know what you know? Because you know things you shouldn't know. You know things that you've never experienced before. If I ask you, how do we know things? Scientific method. You see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, smell it. But you know things that you've never experienced before. So how is it you know those things? But they understood that when he's asking that question, where it leads. And where it leads is to this idea that you are so much more than this thing that experiences this world. This mortal coil that touches and smells and hears and tastes. That there's another part of you, that there's a ghost in this machine, which is called you. A soul, a spirit. And that's the only way that you can possibly know things that you've never experienced before. To know things that you shouldn't know. And it's deep, it's meaningful. because it changes everything. This is the thing that allows Socrates, when he's in his death chamber at the end, when they say, you've been sentenced to drink hemlock, you must, and they're mid-sentence, and this guy's like downing the cup and like getting as much cyanide as he possibly can, sorry, as much hemlock as he possibly can. Why? Because he knows that there's another place he has to be.
How does he know that? How does he know he's supposed to know?
Because you don't know what you don't know. And he understands that you don't know what you don't know. And the only way that you can know the things that you know without having experiencing them is if you experience them in some other way.
So he was trying to know what he knows.
He was trying to understand how it is that we know the things that we don't know. And by the way, it's so obvious to us that we miss it. Has anybody here ever lived in eternity?
Yeah.
By the way, if you have your hand up, you have. You're right. But that's the only way you would even know what eternity is. Think about a word that you've never experienced before. I'll give you a heads up. It's impossible.
Worcestershire.
I didn't say to pronounce the unpronounceable. Worcestershire sauce. W sauce.
How do I experience it?
By the way, you've walked past in the store. You've heard it. Yeah, you've experienced it with those five senses. But there are things that you've never experienced with your five senses because you cannot experience them with your five senses. You can't experience love with your five senses. Maybe. We'll put that one on the side. But you can't experience eternity. Oh, you can't experience perfection. And yet, how is it that we understand what these concepts are? You'd have to experience it in order to come up with a word for it. There's nothing that we have a word for that we've never experienced before. And Socrates is asking that question. How do we know what eternity is? How do we know what perfection is? You ever been walking down, I don't know, have you ever been, maybe in a class or watching Jeopardy or something, and you hear a question, and you answer the question, you're like, how did I know that? Because Socrates believes that you don't know what you don't know. And the things that you do know, by the way, are infinite, because you have all knowledge. You've experienced the whole universe before. You just don't realize it because you've been conditioned to forget it by being brought down into a physical body that can't possibly live in eternity. Think about that. You live in a vessel that can't live in eternity, and yet you have a concept of eternity. That didn't make no sense. It made sense. And yet we walk around with this knowledge like it's just Thursday. Well, yeah, obviously. No, there's nothing obvious about it at all, man. Socrates believes that when you understand how you know the things that you know, it will click off a light in your head and you'll say two things. First off, holy crap, I know everything. And the only way I know everything is because I'm not just a physical body. And that means that when I die, this is only part of the equation. That there's another place for us to be. It also suggests that we already know each other. We already do. And that isn't the kind of thing that a lot of people can get their heads around. They do not like it. Called materialists. People believe that there's just a physical world. But you can't prove. There's a lot of things you can't prove. Because you can't prove things that on an eternal realm that you only experience here in this realm with a physical body. So Socrates believes that how you answer that question has everything to do with your understanding of who and what your true nature is. Who and what you really are. Kill him. Kill him. So here's the fascinating thing about that, and about you, and about Richard Taylor. You cannot know the impact that you have. When we say that without having made the slightest difference of any unique significance, that most people just die and decay like any animal. Maybe, but you cannot know. At some point in the 18th century, there was some farmer over in Austria who had an arranged marriage with somebody. It just happened to be like a meeting between the parents. They hadn't met, then nothing would have ever happened. They got together, they had a farm, they died poor and miserable, had like 9 children, I think like only 3 survived. But then one of those children kind of lived the exact same life. Don't even know their name, by the way. Same kind of a thing, drudgery, work, no appreciation. Then they had a kid. Then they had a kid. And then suddenly, Einstein. Do you think that those great-great-great-great-grandparents who died in squalor and obscurity realized the impact that they were going to have on the world? No. And if you think like, what impact did he really have? Now there's 200,000 Japanese people who think he had a significant impact. There's also a whole world of theoretical physics that looks out into the universe and sees black holes and says, that was a significant impact. You cannot know the impact that you're going to have on people. And by the way, that's for good or bad. And so, whether it's true or not is almost immaterial. Because even if this is true, you can't know. So how do you want to live? Do you want to live as though, yeah, we're going to die and decay and nothing matters? Because if nothing matters, nothing matters. And that's what I was asking earlier, why does that people live that way? Yeah, it's easier in the short term to think, well, nothing matters, so I can do whatever I want to do. Yeah, but imagine being near your deathbed and thinking, holy crap, none of this has mattered. Or not even near your deathbed. Imagine like 20, 30 years before you die, looking at your whole life and going, none of this mattered? Does it seem so easy now to live that way? To live the last several decades of your life, the last few decades of your life, believing that nothing mattered? But of course, if you can live on the other side, everything matters. But then if everything matters, which means how you interact with people. And that can be nerve-wracking, man. And if you guys babysit little kids, and you can sit there and talk all day about love, kindness, love. And then you're walking and you go, oh, shit. And the little kid goes, shit. No. Love, peace, kindness. Shit. So, it's what people pick up on, what people remember. And so it's going to be nerve-wracking because you never know what it's going to be. It's probably not going to be the most flattering thing about you. So you've got those two ways of living. Everything matters, nothing matters. What's the worst case scenario if you live and how about this? What's the best case scenario of living like nothing matters?
Make the best out of everything in life.
No, I'm saying if you don't live that way, if you just kind of go, well, nothing matters. Why make the best is almost an immaterial idea.
If you do that, then you won't ever realize the rest of the world. You won't experience it the way you should be.
You're talking from the perspective of a person who thinks things matter. Well, because then I'll never experience this. It doesn't matter if you experience this or not. How about this? Should you live or die? No. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. To be or not to be. That is the question. That's the speech from Hamlet. He's trying to figure out, should I kill myself or not? And he gets to the very end, and he's talking about all the, should I just endure all the slings and arrows of fortune? Should I just take on all the pains of the world? Or should I just end it? Oh, if I end it, you know what? Oh, that would be cool, man, because that's to dream, perchance to dream. Oh, but there's the rub, because in that dream, who knows what dreams may come? Are we really, when you die, is it just death, or is it hell, or is it some other dimension? It's that unknowing that's difficult for us. And so we end up thinking, well, you know what? Maybe I should live, maybe I should die, maybe I should, I don't know. And we walk away and we never make a decision to live intentionally in any direction. If instead you look and go, you know what, whether things matter or not, I'm going to live as though they do. Now repeat that answer. I said, now repeat that answer. Because if I say, well, maybe nothing matters, but you know what? I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to optimize it. Why? Because things might matter. Maybe they will. You can't know. Imagine, this is a really, really stupid description, but it's one that I can think of. When I was a third-year teacher here, there was a student, I still remember his name, it's just so odd, because we didn't talk much. They gave me a class which was to teach, it was to teach seniors, and I think juniors, if I'm not mistaken, to get them ready for the Casey exam. You guys don't do the Casey exam anymore. It was the high school exit exam. You used to have to pass a test in order to graduate. So it wasn't just like get your, my God, for some of you, 26 credits. It was, you actually had to do school back in the day, and you had to have 44 credits. And you had to do that and pass a test in order to graduate. Now the test was given to you when you were in 10th grade. And if you passed in 10th grade, you were done. If you failed it, you took it twice in 11th grade. If you failed it then, you took it twice in 12th grade. So you got to take the test 5 times. The test was essentially an 8th grade test. 8th grade math, 8th grade English. Essentially it was just, can you do basic stuff? And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of people get grades not based off of what they deserve, but based off of if they help hand out papers and stuff like that, you know? And so there was a student who had failed the test a couple times, 3 times. He was a senior, and he just gave up on all of his classes at that point. So he was way behind in credits. He was like, whatever it was, like 15 classes behind in credits. So he's taking my class, and he takes the test, and the strangest thing happens. He passes. Can you guess how he passed? Cheated his ass off. He told me. Sat next to the person next to him, copied off of him. This guy had to have been the luckiest bastard in the world because there were different versions of the test. So either he sat next to a person who was passing, or he completely randomized his answers by doing the wrong version of the test and still managed to pass. And a passing grade, I think, was 40%, by the way. So exactly. So if you're thinking about, you were more likely to trip over the bar than you were to not go over the bar. And so he came to me, and I was like, dude, congratulations. That's when he told me, I cheated. And he felt terrible about it. I go, yeah, well, okay. And he goes, but now I'm also screwed because I'm 15 credits behind. So I'm not going to graduate anyway. It never occurred to him that there was any value in taking his classes because he's like, I'm not going to pass this test anyway. Why bother? And then a weird thing happened. All of a sudden, he had a meaning and a reason and a purpose. If you can apply that metaphor to your life, it might be a little bit stretched, but if you can apply that metaphor to your life, hopefully you can see some value in that. You could walk through your whole life like nothing matters, and then you can like sleepwalk your way through your 20s and maybe even your 30s, and all of a sudden wake up one day and go, holy crap, life matters. But you're a couple decades behind on making your life matter and setting your life up in a way that can make it matter. It's like if you think, I know a lot of people think like, oh, I'll never be able to buy a home. It's impossible, so why bother? Well, save. Work hard. Save. Why not? Well, it's not going to matter anyway. I might as well just go blow all this money on something else. And then you find yourself in your 40s and 50s with no home, renting still, and you're like, man, I wish I had saved back then, man. I wish I had saved back then. I wish I had done things differently. But what caused you to not do it? Because you didn't believe that there was a future. What's the worst case scenario of believing that there's a future? The worst case scenario is you live like there's one and you make one. What's the best case scenario of believing that there isn't one? There isn't a best case scenario. So the best case scenario of living like there's no future is still lower than the worst case scenario of living like there is one. Take the bet, man. Bet on red. Whatever analogy you need. But bet on your life like there's a future. And the worst case scenario is you make one. Best case scenario is something we can't possibly imagine at this point because we can't see what that future holds. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?
I'm gonna go to the casino and bet on red.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Take every penny you have and every penny you don't have. Go into your parents' and grandparents' wallets and purses. People walking down the street, rob them, take all that money, and go bet on 00 on roulette. Let it all ride. What is it, 43 to 1, I think, in roulette? So
One bit on green.
that's 00. Yeah. Yeah. And then when you win, remember, I believed in you. I encouraged you. So if you're looking to throw a few dollars around,
You gotta put it all again on green.
yeah, and if you fail, just remember, it's only because you didn't bet enough.